Kitab al-Riba, in all the Hanafi fiqh books, toward the end, they have a section where they state, La riba bayna muslimin wa harbiyin fi dari al-harb. This is the section that's being cited to validate interest-based banking for Muslims, or interest-based transactions, usury-based transactions in what they refer to as Darul Harb. The interpretation of that passage and applying that to the modern banking system is flawed, because what that's a reference to is if a Muslim is dealing with a harbi, and a harbi is an active warmonger, a person who is waging war against Islam, and a Muslim is carrying out some type of transaction with the non-Muslim. In that case, for the Muslim to profit, to do profiteering from the harbi non-Muslim, it is permitted in the Hanafi school. So in the commentaries on that section, they have various proof to validate that. And they also mention the incident of Sayyiduna Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. But what they mention in Al-Mabsut, if you check Sarakhsi's Al-Mabsut, you'll find a passage where he mentions if a Muslim gives away 2 gold coins and receives 1 gold coin, it's permitted. So ostensibly, outwardly, this seems like a Muslim is giving more away and taking less, and they say this is permitted. Some of these modern muftis, they have given that citation to validate interest-based banking and riba, mortgages, but that is misquoting the passage. Why? Because anyone who knows anything about coins and currency will know that in the past they had inferior gold coins and there were superior quality gold coins. So the 2 inferior quality gold coins, their value was less than 1 superior gold coin. So when they would mint coins, sometimes the bimetallic compound, or what the composition of the coin was not pure gold, or it was mixed. So a Muslim giving away 2 coins for 1 coin was the Muslim benefiting from the transaction. So the passage is referring to dealings with non-Muslims in Darul Harb, in an active place of war, and the Muslim benefiting from the transaction. Now when you apply that with modern banking, the banks are the only ones that benefit. With the high inflation, high interest rates, there is what? Enslavement of the people to an entire banking elite and a banking mafia that controls most of people, most finances. People are then enslaved to the banking system. They spend 40 to 50 years paying off a mortgage. The amount they spend on a house in Western countries, if they bought a house for a similar price in Africa or in India or in other places of the world, they would have a huge house, a humongous house. Here they pay for a small flat, they would pay $1 million. But if they spent that much money in other countries, they would receive a huge home. So therefore the Muslim is not benefiting by becoming enslaved to the system.
So if I rent a house for €900 and I can buy a house with €500 monthly, that's also not allowed.
See, the difference is that by declaring the place you're living in as Darul Harb, why would you want to live in Darul Harb? A person, if he's living in Darul Harb, he should move back to a place which is not Darul Harb, to Darul Islam, because then there is the legal status of a person in Darul Harb. What is the legal status, Islamically speaking, the hukm shar'i of staying in Darul Harb? The minimum, it's sunnah mu'akkada to move out, the minimum. Meaning in the Hanafi school, the minimum is that if you're living in Darul Harb and your religion is under no threat, then it's sunnah mu'akkada. An opposition to sunnah mu'akkada would be, in Hanafi fiqh, it would be al-isa'a, which is still a minor sin. So rather than renting in Darul Harb, then why not go back to your country of origin or to Darul Islam. So this would be another problem based on that fatwa.
Is this not permissible to buy a house here?
It's not permissible to buy houses on interest-based banking system. So you can buy, if you have cash a house. What's the solution? If the Muslim community, they form a loaning system where they have people who gather cash from various people who can invest, and then they pay off a house for one person who then pays them back. He pays them back, and they have a tier system. Those who are in absolute necessity, they need to buy a house. Remember, if you say it's permitted to buy one house out of necessity, that's different to saying it's permissible to buy houses in Darul Harb based on the fact that there is no riba. There's two different fatwas here. If a mufti gave a fatwa that if a specific person, if he does not buy a house, he will be living on the streets, in that case it's permitted out of necessity. Ad-darurat tubihu al-mahdhurat. But they are not saying this. They are saying it's totally permitted to buy multiple properties. It's totally halal. It's different to saying a person, if he doesn't buy a house, he will be living on the road. Then you have a tier system. Within that tier system, those who have absolute needs, they may be permitted to buy one house, depending on the, meaning it's an evaluation of their situation. And then after this, if you devise a committee of people from within the community that place a certain amount of money within a pot, and then people are selected from those who are within the community with absolute need, then they pay back those Muslims as opposed to paying the banks.
Sheikh, regarding that, in a previous lecture you also mentioned that there is a definition of, there's a difference between Darul Kufr and Darul Harb, where I see you mentioned Darul Harb in Hanafi books and Darul Islam, but Darul Harb, is this found in later works?
No, so Darul Harb and Darul Kufr are synonymous, and you have Darul Islam and Darul Kufr. Sometimes they utilize the word Darul Harb. All it entails is a land in which some of the ahkam differ, some of the legal rulings differ. So for instance, in those times, when a person would enter Darul Harb, they would become what is known as a musta'min, or when a non-Muslim enters Darul Islam, he becomes a musta'min, someone who enters with security. That has been replaced today with what? Visas. So when you enter a non-Muslim country, you enter with a visa. So these are ahkam, legal rulings that are found in texts, old texts. The legal status of some things are the same. Some legal rulings change over time.
These days, many people copy another with like salah, wudu, and I see many people do masha on the socks.
Cotton socks.
Yeah, this side of the socks. And I asked one guy who's Maliki, and he told me it is also permissible in the Hanafi fiqh. So he gave me also
A reference.
the name of the books where is mentioned.
Yeah, so the answer to your question, it's found in Al-Hidayah and other works that the Sahibain, they permitted al-mashu ala al-jawrabain. And Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he also permitted this. He went back to that qawl, that statement. What is mentioned is al-jawrabain. Now what people are doing is they are translating al-jawrabain as modern cotton socks. This is the mistake. Modern cotton socks do not fall under the definition of the jawrabain that were wiped upon by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or were permitted by some of the fuqaha like Al-Imam Abu Hanifa and the Sahibain, because those Jawrabain, they must fulfill 3 conditions. One of those conditions is that a person is able to walk 3 miles in the sock. The second condition is that the sock is, a person is able to wear the sock and the sock is self-supporting. It doesn't require additional materials to support the sock on the foot. The third condition is that the sock is waterproof. So if you wipe the sock, the water does not penetrate the sock. These 3 conditions are not fulfilled with the modern socks. They may be fulfilled with a brand of sock which is known as the seal skin sock, which is a sock you can buy for like £25. The sock you can walk in for 3 miles. It's waterproof and it's self-supporting, in meaning it binds itself to the foot of the person. So al-Jawrabain is not the same as modern cotton socks. And finally, if you check properly, all 4 schools prohibit wiping upon the modern socks. Some people will quote some Hanbali scholars like Jamaluddin al-Qasimi from the last century permitting this, but the rajih opinion in the Hanbali school also, and all 4 schools, is that the modern cotton sock is not permitted to wipe upon.
Also not the shoe, when you say leather shoe, when you walk whole day outside on it.
So theoretically, you can pray in shoes and wipe upon leather shoes. Theoretically. Practically you cannot. Why? Because in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when people wore shoes, the outside, the streets and even the masjid surface was full of sand and stone. So the Sahaba alayhim ridwan, when they would enter the masjid, they would pick up some sand, wipe the shoe and enter the masjid. This was permitted. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in one hadith narrated in the Sunan of Imam Abu Dawood, was praying and during the salah removed the shoes, and then the companions removed the shoes. When after the salah he inquired from the companions, why did you remove the shoes? They said, we saw you doing so and we did that. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Jibreel alayhi salam informed me there was something on the shoes, so I removed them. This was for the Sharia legislation. And when people would enter the masjid, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to them, if you find any impurity, then wipe away the impurity with the sand. This is of course for impurity which is a solid impurity that could be removed with sand. But with the inception of the modern age, where mosques, masajid are carpeted, we have carpets in the masajid, and then the modern shoe is not as flexible as the old ancient shoes, but as well as the streets are filled with all types of impurities, from alcohol to dog urine to dog excrement and so many various impurities, it becomes a virtual, practical impossibility for someone to enter the masjid, to clean the sole of the shoe, to enter the masjid with the shoes on, and then pray with the shoes on, especially if the shoes are not supple and bendable. So sometimes this is where it's a danger of la madhabiyya, not following one of the 4 schools, that a person opens the works of hadith and extracts legal rulings from the hadith directly without reference to fiqh jurisprudence.
If we from the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah are on the right path, why is Mecca and Medina still in the hands of the Salafi Wahhabi?
Well, the question, if you analyze this question, firstly, why was Makkah al-Mukarramah and al-Madinah al-Munawwarah for the majority of history under the rule of Ahl Sunnah? So, meaning if that were a way to determine the truth, if someone were to say, for 90 years they have been ruling Makkah al-Mukarramah, therefore they are upon the truth, then we would respond by saying, for the majority of Muslim history, There were exceptions, like when some of the Khulafa were Mu'tazila, or when the so-called Fatimi dynasty, the Shia, they ruled Al-Haramain also, until Nuruddin Zangi wrestled out the control from them. And there were periods of time when other groups may have ruled Makkah al-Mukarramah. But for the majority of history, it was Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So if that is a way of testing truth, who is ruling the Haramain, then the Jews would claim the same, that from 1967 they have been ruling Al-Quds al-Sharif. And in today's day and age, the Saudi government is no longer aligning itself with Wahhabism. Now, with Mohammed bin Salman, there is more of a nationalistic, secular approach to the rule of the Saudi royal family, as opposed to being a theologically inclined rule. So the question is flawed in reality. And in the near future, the rulers or the hands of the rulers will change, and they always change from time to time. So it's not a way of determining the truth. Of course, no ruler ever lasts for hundreds of years.
Can we pray behind the Imam to Quran?
So our ulama have always given the answer that prayer behind Ahlul Bid'ah is makruh tahriman in our Hanafi school. And we do deem the Wahhabis, the Najdis, as being Ahlul Bid'ah, people of innovation. So if you go to Al-Haramain, the Sharifain, you respond to the call of prayer, you go to the masjid, but you always repeat the prayer. And some ulama don't even pray behind them. But that depends on the level of knowledge with regard to who the Imam is, what he has said. But for the general people, we always repeat the prayer.
Someone asked me about, they say that you have the 4 Imams, right? So they said to me that if you have 4 Imams, 4 different types of rulings, how can you have 4 different types of rulings if the Prophet ﷺ did one thing? So there's one kitab of the Quran.
So the difference between the Sharia that was revealed upon the Prophet ﷺ is that this Sharia, Rasulullah ﷺ described it in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. It is recorded, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ بِالْحَنِيفِيَةِ السَّمْحَةِ. I was sent with the natural, easygoing religion. So Rasulullah ﷺ permitted some of the differences. And the wisdom of having 4 madhahib is to have leeway for the Muslims. For instance, if you go to China and people accept and adopt Islam in China, but they still eat certain things, you can give them fatwa according to the Maliki school, because non-poisonous snakes are permitted in the Maliki school. Slugs and snails are permitted in the Maliki school. So many creatures that we would deem undesirable are permitted in the Maliki school. Or for instance, in Bangladesh, where they eat all sorts of sea creatures, the fatwa can be given according to the Maliki school. Likewise, someone who has waswasa in tahara, in the Maliki school, they follow the hadith that إِنَّ الْمَاءَ طَهُورٌ لَا يُنَجِّسُهُ شَيْءٌ, that indeed water is pure, nothing impurifies it, إِلَّا مَا غَلَبَ عَلَى رِيحِهِ وَطَعْمِهِ وَلَوْنِهِ, except what becomes dominant upon the smell, the taste, and the color of the water. So they say if you have a bucket of water, impurity falls in, you cannot see the impurity or smell the impurity or taste the impurity, the water remains fine. So someone who has psychological wasawis, this fatwa will help him. So Al-Imam Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani rahimahullah, in his book Al-Mizan al-Kubra, he mentions the Sharia was revealed between Al-Azima wal-Rukhsa, the difficulty and the leeway. And the rulings are recorded in the 4 schools for a reason. There is a wisdom behind this. For instance, you board an aeroplane and you are unable to stand up for the prayer. You're not permitted to stand up for the prayer. You cannot act upon the Hanafi ruling. So you do jama' bayna salatayn. combining the two prayers of Dhuhr and Asr in accordance with the Shafi'i school, because there is a leeway when there is necessity. So there is a wisdom behind why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam permitted some differences. Like the Quran is in 10 qira'at. So the 7 ahruf were revealed in order to make easy the recitation of the Quran. Likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted some leeway in the legal rulings. And an example of this is in the Sahih of Imam Bukhari, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam dispatched a group of people and he said to them, do not pray until you reach the dwellings of Bani Qurayza. So they went, and on the way Salatul Asr entered, the late noon prayer. And when Salatul Asr entered, some of them said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam meant that we must hasten towards Banu Qurayza, but we pray now. Another group said, no, the command was literal. And they prayed when they arrived at Banu Qurayza. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was informed of this difference, but he did not reprimand either group. He was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to permit some leeway in some legal rulings when the religion is made easy for the people, because later Islam would spread across the globe and some of these legal rulings were necessary and needed.
Sheikh, where does that leave the ruling of talfiq?
So there is a difference between at-talfiq and rukhsa. At-talfiq is what? Mixing and matching the 4 schools in such a way that the ruling becomes invalid according to the school that you follow. This is referred to as at-talfiq. Al-Imam Abdul Ghani al-Nablusi rahimahullah, he has a book, Khulasatu Tahqiq, the conclusion of which is that talfiq is impermissible, that you do an act of worship in such a way that it's not permissible in any one of the 4 schools. But a-rukhsa to shar'iyah is permitted. What is not permitted is tatabbu' al-rukhas lil-hawa, following a rukhsa for desires, just for the desire, following various rukhas. If you notice, the examples I have given are only out of necessity, that you give a fatwa according to the necessity and the requirements of the time. Otherwise, a person who is multazim of the Hanafi school, he does not combine. But in such a scenario, he should combine in order not to miss one of the prayers. So there is a distinction between al-rukhsa and talfiq, and then even with the rukhsa, even though there's big disputes amongst the scholars on rukhsa, the better position is not to follow rukhas for tatabbu' al-hawa, the following of desires, as Al-Imam Yahya bin Sharaf al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala points out in his fatawa. He states it's not permitted to follow rukhas for desires, because then a person ends up following his desires, just following the rukhas from all the schools. Shall we conclude there, inshallah? Yes? Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammadan sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ma huwa ahluh. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Bitcoin. Are you still live?
No.
Oh, he's taken the live down.
It's
It's off. There's a question regarding what? Bitcoin. So digital currency, my position on digital currency is that digital currency is what? It's a scam. It's like a pyramid scheme. People invest. Some percentage of people will benefit initially, but when they pull out the money from, and they make tangible money from the digital currency, the value drops, and then it does not pick up to what it was previously. So I believe it's impermissible. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ma huwa ahluh. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Yeah, we'll do that now. You can take it off now.